what is the difference between New World and Elder Scrolls Online? You know, I started New World with a sense of excitement when it first came out. And superficially, New World is pretty much everything I could hope for. It's got beautiful environmentals. It's got an amazing gathering system. There's no MMO out there that feels so amazing when you go out and chop a tree or collect some ore or go fishing. It's a really polished, fun game when it comes to combat. And while I can't speak for what it's like to engage in combat in large groups in a PvP setting, general combat in a single player setting, engaging NPCs, is very pleasant. It feels like the weapons have weight and come in contact with the enemy. It's really refreshing when you compare it to other games which are tab target or just feel sort of floaty and inconsequential, ESO included. That being said, though, what really broke New World for me is the complete absence of any type of meaningful lore and the seeming obsession by the developers to create a game that is extremely neutral and inoffensive in its content and subject matter. It doesn't have anything in it that could possibly be controversial. At least that's the feeling I get when I play it. I thought it was strange that when you start playing the game, one of the first things you realize is that they have thoughtfully added a pronoun selector so that you can make sure everyone knows what your preferred pronouns are when you're playing the game. But they did not find it necessary to add any kind of character customization after you create your character initially. You can't even change your hairstyle or features. And there's no transmog system, so you can't change the way your character looks either. These are really basic things that players would want. And they're things that are included in just about every other MMO I know of. And yet New World, despite managing to have a pronoun selector, didn't feel like that was something they needed to include. Then there's the fact that in New World, the characters really are all very generic looking, despite the fact that there are some customization options. The overall feeling of the game winds up being that all the characters look like a bunch of indescript dudes. It doesn't matter if it's a female character or a male character, they all basically just look like generic guys. There's no sexy female characters in New World. Now, does that necessarily matter? Well, maybe not. And yet, it's nice to feel like there's a diversity in the different types of characters that you encounter or are able to make in the game. And most other MMOs manage to offer that, but New World really just doesn't. It feels lacking in the territory of character customization, and that's a huge thing. The truth is, despite the fact it's purely cosmetic, and in a sense it doesn't really matter, it's important to a lot of players to be able to make their characters the way they like them to look, and to see while playing that other people's characters look unique based on whatever their tastes might be. And New World really just doesn't offer that. So it starts to feel like New World is basically just a stat grind to reach a higher level and then it's a competition to see who can have a bigger number. And if that's all there is, then there's not really a lot to bind the community together and to create the sense of a community, other than it just being a competitive game where people are in a race to see who can grind more or who can grind faster than somebody else. And that leads me to the part of lore. When I think about New World, when I think about going back to play the game, the truth is the biggest reason why I think about going back to play New World is because it doesn't require a subscription of any kind. It's totally free to play. You buy it, you own it forever. And I do like that. But I also think about how I would never pay a subscription for New World. Absolutely not. I have zero desire to spend a dime on New World other than the initial money that I spent when I bought the game up front. Now, if there was a significant expansion and I was playing the game, then maybe that would be something I would want to buy. But as far as paying a monthly subscription to be able to be part of the New World community, I have no desire to, because I don't view New World as really having a community. And maybe some of that is not purely the game's fault, because it is a new franchise and you don't start a franchise with all the lore in place and everything right out of the gate. So sometimes maybe you have to be patient and say, well, it's got to find its legs. But by the same measure, if something is new, it doesn't necessarily get a free pass. And when I think about something like ESO and the Elder Scrolls franchise, there's a lot of lore there. You can get all sorts of lore books, you can get figurines, you can get more collectibles than I could begin to enumerate for Elder Scrolls games, which have been around for going on 30 years now, maybe more than 30 years. But the point I'm getting at is there's a real sense that the Elder Scrolls universe is real. It's kind of like Star Trek or Star Wars. It's right up there with all these other fantasy franchises which are beloved and respected. It's something where I can look at the game and I can say, well, there's a few things that I don't think are great about the game, but it's such an amazing established franchise, I'm really honored to be part of it. And New World doesn't offer that at all. So when you go around in New World, you do see different themes. There's an Asian city, I believe Ebonscale Reach, I think, and then there's the new desert area. And those areas are beautiful. You can tell that there's Asian influences in the architecture. In some places, there's, of course, the Roman influence in the city that's built out in the desert. And yet, again, it all feels mysteriously indescript. There's no references to anything that could be substantive. It's all just the form without the spirit. There's no sense of connection to anything real. And that's kind of weird, because you would think that since New World is actually, while fantasy, rooted in the real world more than something like the Elder Scrolls, which is set on a different planet and possibly a different universe even, we see substantial tributes to real life culture in the Elder Scrolls, whereas in New World, despite the fact that there's an enormous opportunity to pay a tribute to cultures throughout history in the design of the game, there's not really any reference to anything that would be spiritually true to the things that are represented in the form of perhaps visuals or architecture or world design. All things considered, it winds up just being a really empty experience in New World. There's other things that play a factor into my decision to not necessarily want to play the game, like the fact that crafting can feel a little bit pointless if you don't really need crafted materials to play the game. Of course, that could also be true of Elder Scrolls Online and a lot of other MMOs. Most other MMOs. And I understand that there is a payoff. You can't have a game that's not full loot PvP and have the depth of a realistic supply and demand economy that you would have with it. You kind of have to pick. Do you want to have a full loot PvP sort of environment, or do you want to have a more theme park style of game? And if you pick the theme park, then you're not going to have as realistic of an economy. Maybe one of the problems of New World is that it's tried to be a little bit of both. It's tried to be the spirit of a full loot PvP game that's not quest driven, and to be something where the narrative is completely player created and player driven. But then they shifted course and they tried to be a theme park because they realized theme park MMOs have a broader appeal ultimately. That kind of creates a situation where New World has always struggled to have a firm sense of identity. Whether you're looking at it from the perspective of lore, or you're looking at it from the perspective of it just being a new game and a new franchise, or you're looking at it from the perspective of it being a game that could never quite figure out whether it was trying to be a PvP driven game or a theme park MMO. All of those things together add up to me thinking that New World is an amazing game, but an amazing game that doesn't give me any compelling reasons to play it. And it's sort of like if we were to compare games to relationships, that meaningful relationship that has depth and personality, that's supportive and encouraging and positive and filled with a lot of different layers and dimensions, and something that's purely physical that lacks intimacy, but on some level aesthetically looks better. It really doesn't matter. And it's true, a pretty face will turn your head, but it's what is below the surface, it's what's inside, it's the spirit of a thing that really makes you want to stay. And in the case of New World, there really isn't any spirit there. So that's why, in a nutshell, I've been playing ESO and I've been enjoying the world of ESO, while I've wanted to love New World, but ultimately had to concede that its time in the sun for me is over, and I really can't find any compelling reason to play. Thanks for watching. Till next time, good luck on your adventure.